Japanese love to consume, you know, so whereas in Europe and America, people will forego spending to maybe buy a house or a car, whereas in Japan, most assets, houses, cars are inherent. So they kind of already have that head start. So they have all this money and they tend to spend it on clothes and electronics and travel and all that. So I think that's where the world looks at the Japanese and thinks that the Japanese person is generally fairly rich. It's not that they're rich, it's just that they don't spend their money on cars and houses and some of the other luxuries that Western society says, you know, you must buy a house now.
The ability for the Japanese consumer to spend is very high as well. People make good money here and they have good savings. And they're not afraid to spend money on things that they think are going to be of high quality.
If you look at the average brand that has some form of D2C, what we call D2C, direct to consumer, 10 years ago e-commerce was zero basically, and then over the last 5 and 10 years it's literally growing at 1% each year.
The in-person shopping culture is still larger in Japan than the digital shopping, than the e-commerce culture, and I think that probably outweighs most other cultures a little bit in terms of like the relevant ratios between the two. I don't know what the figure is, but yeah, there's definitely more in-person shopping happening.
Yeah, people are very comfortable shopping online in Japan, so it is as big as anywhere that I'm aware of. I'm not sure what the exact statistics are compared to the West, or Germany.
The main two marketplaces for sort of everyday items are Rakuten and Amazon Japan. And that's where pretty much everyone is, you know. If you want to, the vibe is a little bit different between the two. Rakuten is more of like a what can I get on the cheap, when you're looking for a large amount of variety, but you want to get a reasonable price out of it, you're probably going to go to Rakuten for that. And then Amazon is, you know, kind of similar to the States and other countries, I believe, in how it's used. But Amazon Japan is one of the things that's very consistent between the two marketplaces and with almost any online e-commerce is the speed of delivery, which is almost always the next day or 2 days later if they're slow. It's amazing, especially if you live like in the main areas, like main population centers.
Rakuten had a different business model where they offered basically it's a marketplace for people, right? So people can open like their e-shop, and they basically housed a very simple place where people can put their product in, and they did all the kind of inventory and kind of fulfillment stuff, and huge business. And then Amazon started doing the same thing, and also actually doing regular e-commerce and Prime and video and stuff. So I think Rakuten's hurting right now, but they were kind of the first to kind of give, Japan, like, land's very expensive. If you want to open a store, it's not so easy, and to give that kind of service for people to have an online presence, to kind of sell that one thing that they're good at, for example. I think that there's a market need for that, so I think they did that well for Japan.
Almost all brands have their own e-commerce sites as well. So it's very important to have at least your own e-commerce site, and then ideally you're working with Amazon or working with Rakuten to have a separate instance. And yeah, you lose a lot of money in sort of fees and things like that, but the proliferation value, the awareness value alone is just massive. There are a lot of brands on Rakuten that would probably just completely collapse if it weren't for Rakuten, because Rakuten just gets them in front of so many people.
I think e-commerce is becoming a thing, but we have seen some survey data research showing that people here are basically quite cautious when it comes to payment on mobile phone because they don't think it's safe.
Certain things like PayPal not being popular at all in Japan, those kind of things get oversighted really easily. A lot of people come to us and say, "Oh, I'll just use PayPal." It's like, you're not going to use PayPal. It doesn't work. You know, it's just like brand awareness is too low for PayPal. You know, you run into trust issues.
Credit card shopping was a big kind of, like, you know, the fear of kind of like, is it safe? It's a cash-based society in Japan, so credit cards fundamentally, like, people walk around with wads of cash, right? Because so credit cards just now start to get a little bit more popular.
You have to use a domestic platform, something that basically allows the customers to pay by bank transfer or cash on delivery, or the really weird one, which is convenient store payment, which is very interesting for most cultures who don't really have that.
Yeah.
But yeah, making sure that you've got a domestic payment gateway is really important.
I think we also saw in the research that we asked about people's, like, the reason why they would choose or be loyal to a brand or to a service, and I think the point service is like ranked second or third among all the factors, so it's really, really important.
Yeah. The loyalty systems are really good in Japan. One of the biggest credit cards is the Rakuten credit card, because Rakuten's point system is just massive, and it's very lucrative, actually. Just to give you an idea of how lucrative it is, our company, one of our corporate credit cards is a Rakuten card, and so we use Rakuten to buy just like random things here and there. But a month ago, we wanted to buy a mini fridge, and we used Rakuten points, and we didn't pay a penny. We just used like our Rakuten points and bought a mini fridge, and now we've got a mini fridge.
Aber schauen wir uns mal die Online-Shops an sich an, denn schon auf den ersten Blick fällt auf, dass die nicht unbedingt dementsprechend, was wir uns unter einer modernen Webseite vorstellen.
It's very much information overload, so where they do have a web presence, they want to tell you everything. They want to tell you what's going on today, tomorrow, next month, next year.
If you look at China versus Japan versus North America or Europe, China's on the extreme side of microboxing, hundreds of little offers. And Japan's kind of in the middle.
Yeah, we have been discussing this for a while, saying maybe people are just very used to the super cluttered layout. So for some of our global clients, we may need to let them know that the simple to use, like, beautiful layout that you think is the correct choice may not work as well in Japan, because people are not used to that layout.
Yeah, I think the feeling, I'm not Japanese, of course, as you may have noticed. I think the feeling is that it's overly simple, it's a bit empty. Where's all the things that I need to know? Where's the different offers? Why is it just this? And perhaps because Japan is a very rules-based society, there's a sort of comfort in being given menus and rules and options that you can choose between and then follow those systems. So if you're only given one thing at a time, I think it can feel a little bit lacking.
So every country has, and the people of those countries have different expectations for a website.
In Japan, I think people expect to be given options, and they expect to be given the trust comes from being shown all the options in more detail rather than a single proposition.
Japanese would traditionally pay a higher price as long as the story of quality is clearly communicated. Whereas I think in the West we're more about function. What does this do for me? Whereas Japan want to know about the sturdiness and how strong it is, and design is important, of course, but there's lots of things.
I don't think it's that it's a design problem. I think it's an information thing. I think brands are trying to deliver more information and more options for Japanese users to find their own way to the information that they want, right?
And I think they want to give as much information as possible, which is sometimes then hard to decode as a viewer, as a consumer, it's really difficult to know, okay, well, where do I look and what's relevant for me today, and how do I work that out?
I mean, Japan, they love information, right? So you can open up the product page for something as simple as, like I said, like a USB cable. And it's just like all of this information, all of these photos, close-ups. It's like, we don't need that in Western cultures, right? But if you're going to be competitive on Rakuten, you've got to go the extra step. You got to, give more information and optimize your channels for it.
So I think that's one of the factors that results in Japanese design having a lot of different offers. What to us looks like just too much happening, I think feels to them, to Japanese native audience, that I have all these choices, and that's part of their service. They have very different expectations around service, around what, how they're catered to.
Maybe Japanese users are more of a choose your own adventure type of consumer, and so a lot of websites cater their content to that voice.
It's similar to, I suppose, if a salesman came to your house in Japan versus overseas. I think in Japan they would walk you through everything. Like, here you can do this or this or this. This is good. This is good. This is this does this. This does this. I think a sales pitch or might be a little more linear in a Western situation. So that, I think, all fits into that one idea of providing a lot. Some would say too much.
A lot of brands, when they come over, they say, I've got this really simple site. Can we just translate this to Japanese? And we always try to encourage them to add more information. Do you have more information about the product? What about the sourcing of the materials of the product? Is any of that from Japan? Is it made in China? Tell me more about your your logistics. Like, how are you deploying that out to people, sending it out to people? Because the more information that you can have, the more sort of professional and the higher level of trust you can elicit in Japanese consumers.
Like, to stand out as a foreign and new brand, you have to invest a lot of money to gain the trust and set up the awareness. One
thing though is it requires patience. A lot of people come to Japan and they think it's going to be a quick hit, but you do have to be patient, because the Japanese people can buy and get access to pretty much anything that they want. And so if your product is similar to something that they already have access to, then how are you going to create a new want for your product, right?